I'm going to talk about violence in video games and in specific discuss where the line of too much might be. What could possibly go wrong? Please do comment down below, but first, my opinion. I'm Tarmack and this is Feature Creep. I'm a big proponent of the idea that violent media doesn't affect people in a meaningful way. I have been for years, decades even, and ultimately I think my desire for that viewpoint is largely based in self-interest. I enjoy violent video games and don't want to see them taken away because some poorly adjusted fool who just so happened to own a game console or computer decided to go shoot up a school. I like my hobby just the way it is. However, I have to admit that despite there being no credible studies that prove any kind of linkage, I do believe that there is some element of desensitization occurring and video games are not innocent, nor are they the sole culprit. News media, comics, music, movies, games, books, ogrish.com, the list of things contributing to an overall adjustment of social norms is quite long. Something as innocuous as Slenderman is basically just a current-day Bloody Mary. Logic dictates that the more an individual is exposed to something, the more likely that something is going to affect that person in some way. A game like Grand Theft Auto is a prime example, but has to be considered on a vast array of potential behavioral modifications. We know that a significant number of people who are underage play these games, and it seems to me that should a proper study actually be conducted, it would need to have a range of behavior alterations, from basic use of language, treatment of others, penchant towards violent behavior, etc. Does that mean that I think a game can potentially make someone a killer? No, that still seems a stretch. I know that watching professional wrestling can make dumbass kids do stupid things on a trampoline. I know that video games can affect the word choice of children. Obviously, there's a vast continuum here in what can cause this influence and how far that influence can go. To state that no such influence exists, though, is to be completely ignorant or have an ulterior motive, much like me wanting my hobby to stay semi-violent. In all of this, of course, the parents are the most responsible. If they let a 10-year-old kid play GTA 5, that is a clear flaw on the part of the parents, and we can't sit back and blame the developer for doing such a silly thing as making a mature game for adults. However, I think it's equally dangerous to avoid putting some aspect of responsibility on the developer. Hatred is a recent example of that, a game that is intentionally violent for violence sake. Their trailer boasts about just how violent the game is, basically being a societal killing simulator. I'm all for creative expression and social commentary, though. Free speech, being one of the most valued aspects of society, simply demands it. However, it is clear that the only reason that they chose to go over the top, with not just the violence but also in glorifying the killer, was to latch onto the free marketing train via outraged people in the media. GTA has a great deal of violence, but it also has redeeming qualities that make it a presentation that on the whole is actually quite impressive. Hatred doesn't seem to grasp that concept and is little more than a shock value game with no content. Yet as I read the various posts from people online about it, the common thread is rather divisive. The most common defense that I've seen used is precisely something that I've already commented on. You can go on a murderous rampage in GTA, so what makes Hatred so different? To be clear, this is a logical fallacy referred to as the false equivalency and is actually one of the silliest arguments that people could be using. It does come very close to raising a valid point, but misses the mark at the last minute. The valid argument that these people actually mean to make is that Hatred hasn't passed their line in the sand yet. It's not violent enough as to cause them concern and therefore is no less dangerous or damaging than GTA, which is actually a valid position to take. My curiosity revolves around that line though. I want to know where it is. What is too much violence? It has to exist for a majority, and in fact, given the response to the game overall, I think there's a good chance that it passed the line for a majority of gamers. For the rest though, I wanted to pose some hypotheticals. What if the developers of Hatred included a custom map that was an area blueprint of Columbine or Sandy Hook schools where actual shootings occurred? Would that be too far? What if a game involved primarily killing children? What if a VR game using a true immersion experience like the Oculus Rift had you kill people in the first person rather than the third person isometric experience? Have I gone too far yet? What if there was a version of Surgeon Simulator where instead of a sedated patient, you operated on a conscious, restrained victim? Keep in mind that I'm not suggesting that these are good ideas. They're all abhorrent to me, but I do think that there is value in considering extremes to try to figure out where that line actually is drawn. My argument about why I can attack Hatred but not GTA is very simple. With violence, the context is not only important, it's essential. Randomly shooting a bunch of pedestrians when you're bored of side quests or the main story in GTA is vastly different from playing a game where you play as a killer and the only thing you can do in the game is kill large numbers of innocent people. Context has always mattered. Now, I would never go as far as to say the game shouldn't exist. Free speech is important. It's also, however, equally important to remember that just because you are free to say or create anything you like does not require others to respect you, like you, or support your goals. The developers who built this particular title have really given us nothing of value other than a discussion to have. The decision to make a game like Hatred lacks any real creativity except the avenue of marketing, and even then, they just followed the Postal model. It's a real pity that they didn't feel that they had the skill to create something of substance. Violence is a touchy subject in gaming. We immediately become defensive due to years of public attention brought undeserved to our hobby. I think that we would be better served by acknowledging that there is some potential for violence to be too much, rather than a black and white attitude of all violence versus no violence. The issue isn't that simple. I'd love to hear what you think about where the line of too much violence should be drawn. Leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this, maybe consider subscribing. That's all I have to say. Tarmack out.